I'm Jim Csek here with
Renee Merrifield.
We're here today, Beyond the Ballot. Again, like so much to talk about, but the thing that's really on everybody's mind is tariffs, and we're supposedly going to get a 30-day reprieve, and then we're not.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was, the tariffs came in, and then about 4 hours later, I was at a dinner party, and I was like, oh wait, no, they're gone. You guys, you have to stay on Twitter because otherwise you're not going to have the latest and greatest. And it did seem like we were going to get that 30 days off of, of having the tariffs. I think that Trump is just having fun with us at this point. I think he's figured out that the entire world responds to his threat of tariffs, and he's just pulling whichever lever that he feels like he needs to at the time, and really creating a tremendous amount of havoc and chaos in the world. There was a poll out recently that showed how the Canadian people were reacting to Trump's presidency. And there is more uncertainty right now in the Canadian people than there was during COVID. Yeah. And I found that to be a shocking statistic, but obviously something that we need to really pay attention to, because all of that uncertainty and all of that chaos really plays on our minds and in our lives.
And I think part of that is that we don't have a clear leader right now. Like, we don't have one voice speaking back.
No, we do though. Mark Carney keeps speaking for all of us here. I keep seeing him on the American media. Are you not seeing him there?
Yeah, I have, but I mean, we don't, because we have Jagmeet Singh that was on CNN.
Oh, that's true.
CNN, true. And then making threats, and then we have like Mark Carney, and then we have Justin Trudeau. I think made a speech from Paris yesterday.
Yes.
And I guess while he's in Paris, if like the Liberals are saying we shouldn't bring Parliament back because we're at a dangerous place, one of the most dangerous places in our economic history. So we can't bring Parliament back. We must focus 100% on this problem. Yet he's in Paris. That doesn't make any sense to me. Those two things don't reconcile.
The only thing that he is focused on is his farewell speeches to all of his friends across the world. I do not see him taking a proactive stance. I don't see him talking to the one person that he should be right now, which is Trump, and really advocating for Canadians. And really, for you, your comment about us not having a leader is well put. We do not have a vision forward. We do not have a leader. We do not have anyone that is out there negotiating new trade paths for our goods and services and for our natural resources. And it's a scary time right now. It's a scary time. Carney has gotten basically a free pass from the mainstream media. He has not shown up to all of the different interviews. I've watched a couple of interviews on both Karina Gold and with Chrystia Freeland. Oh my chicken, are they ever getting just hammered by the media? Meanwhile, Carney doesn't even grace the mainstream with his presence, and he's throwing out these lobs of videos and propaganda, and that seems to be being lapped up. And it's beyond me. I'm absolutely perplexed. I'm perplexed about even the polls that are coming out. And my only thought is the polls cannot be about Carney. They have to be about just Trudeau's gone.
This crisis, I mean, I think there was somebody on Fox News saying that Trudeau's leaked that hot mic thing was likely intentional, because this
you don't leak your hot mic.
The tariff thing is helping the Liberals for sure. It's actually helping them, and it seems like maybe they're trying to stoke it a little bit, because this latest tariff is really damaging, especially to Ontario, right? Like, Canada exports like $11 billion of steel, $10 billion of aluminum.
Yeah.
And that could raise the prices, and people just like, well, Mark Carney was actually interviewed by David Rosenberg on CTV and said that he was going to switch the carbon tax from the consumer carbon tax to putting it on steel, which is basically a tax, right? Because he said, who buys steel? Well, I'd like to remind everybody that everybody buys steel. It's in the fridge, it's in the car, it's in this table that we're sitting at.
It's in the buildings.
It's in the buildings. It's absolutely in everything. And right now they're saying this could have such dramatic. It's in the pop cans, and it's in almost everything. Aluminum is well used, and there is some processes out there that are actually a combination of aluminum and plastics too in a lot of vehicles too, right?
And there is this belief that, well, that's fine, we'll just trade with other partners and we'll just sell to other partners. It's a little bit of a misnomer to think that we can simply shift to to selling to someone else. When you lose a large demand like the United States is, what's going to happen is that our price on steel and aluminum is going to go down because now we have less demand, we have less of a market, and that is going to absolutely injure. We don't have to look any farther than 2018 to see what the impact of these tariffs are going to be. Reminder to everyone who's listening, Trump did this the last time that he was in power in 2018. He put them in for a full calendar year, and during that time, our aluminum demand fell by 50%. It had a devastating impact, especially to Quebec. And as I was listening to the tariff announcement, I literally thought to myself, well, I wonder if Quebec's okay with an east to west pipeline now. I wonder if they're going to be all right. I mean, there's 35,000 jobs at stake just in Quebec alone. That's significant, and it is their number one export, and without it, I don't think they have an economy.
I listened to Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, saying that the economies between Mexico, Canada, and the United States for the automotive industry are so intertwined with parts and stuff like that. He said it will really hurt, and they've been trying to talk to the administration as well to say, hey, we need to pump the brakes here because it's going to hurt not only Canadians, it's also going to hurt Americans. One of the things that the Canadians could do or the government could do is actually say, well, if you want to add 25% of steel and aluminum, let's just add 50 and then see what happens in the United States. Because I think a lot of the border states are really trying to fight for Canada right now too, right? So I think Danielle Smith still is trying to dial back the rhetoric where, you have Jagmeet Singh on CNN basically
declaring war.
Yeah, with Trump, he's not exactly the. I don't know what to say with what why Jagmeet Singh would be on CNN speaking for Canada.
I the mainstream media and who they're choosing to speak on behalf of Canada is a little odd to me right now. And what I will say is that Trump wants to hurt our jobs. So he wants to bleed our companies, have our companies shift where their dollars are going to be spent, have them shift into the States. He knows that money is global. He knows that money can move. We've talked about that very thing on this show, how $400 billion basically deficit has been moved into the U.S. from Canada over the course of the last 7 years. And so Trump wants more of that. He wants more of the same. And, he went on record by saying, I don't care about their jobs. I want the jobs here. What he needs to recognize, though, is the cost of living is going to affect all of Americans. I recently saw the impact of what the tariffs are going to do to the cost of housing in the U.S. It's going to have a significant impact. If he doesn't think that the cost of steel going up by 25% is going to have an impact in the housing market, I mean, he simply is ignorant or doesn't understand. So I think that he needs to be more aware of those aspects and really be thinking about the cost of living. Because while he might save a few jobs for the Midwest, he certainly is going to impact the cost of living for all Americans.
And then we also should note that the USMCA is there. And the only reason he's allowed to skirt it, even for his administration, is that he's saying that it's a national emergency.
Yes.
And that we should be taking him to court for that because he's losing a lot of court battles right now. He's doing a lot of stuff in the United States that he's being blocked by the court system. So why aren't we talking about taking him to court? Because we do have an agreement with the USMCA.
Yes, I also heard that Stéphane Dion was out. Our ambassador was out just the other day talking about how we should go to the UN court. And because his threats are actually, him, referring to us as the 51st state, and is actually
attacking our sovereignty.
Yeah. And
so he loses lots of times in courts because he just kind of throws stuff out there, and people. The only way to probably deal with them in that regard is actually with the legal system.
It is. The justice system does hold, government in, to account, and the government is actually, in the justice system in the U.S. is actually much more controlled than what we are here in Canada. Our system takes way too long, and judgments take way too long, and very few of our laws actually make it to the court system, whereas in the US, that's actually one of their checks and balances that has to be met. So I do think that, that might happen. Is it going to happen right away? No, I don't think so. I think that Trump wants to see more havoc being wreaked on the rest of the world, and in doing so, he thinks that the United States citizens are gonna love him. Now, at the Super Bowl, and I need somebody to fact check this, and maybe you can put this in the comments, but it was said that he was booed. Now, Taylor Swift was also booed because she used to be an Eagles fan, and now she's not. But Trump was booed, but that the media actually put over top of the boos cheers.
I never saw that. I watched, and it looked like, I mean, there was so much noise. It sounded like
noise,
cheers, but like, and the Taylor Swift one, you saw on her face the reaction when she was booed. Like, and it could have been because of the Chiefs, though. Too, you know what I mean? Like, instead of just Taylor Swift, because she was like, "What's going on?" I mean, that you could read her lips. She's like, "What's
totally.
going on?"
Yeah.
I
My point is, I just don't know how the American people are taking Trump's.
According to the polls, he's doing really well. Even CNN is putting it out there.
Okay.
Like, according to the polls, more people are favorable to, and this has nothing to do with Canada. This has to do with what they're doing with Doge and stuff like that. And his approval rating is really high in the United States right now. And that has to do, most Americans probably don't even know what's going on with Canada.
Probably
Nor
not.
do they care. Most Americans probably don't even know where
Most
Canada
Americans
is.
don't have a passport and don't ever get outside the United States. So, yeah.
I remember being in a gas station once. I think it was in Oregon or something. There was a smokestack way off into the distance there, like maybe like 30 miles away. And I said to the young lady that was pumping the gas, she was probably like 20-ish. I said, "What's that over there?" She's like, "Never been that far."
Yeah, I know. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy.
So,
but it is firing. I mean, Vaughn Palmer wrote a great article in the Vancouver Sun. I think it was yesterday. But he wrote about how EB has suddenly come to life. How EB has been basically very docile, very quiet. Mandate letters were late coming out. He promised during the election that he was going to come out on housing affordability and public safety and access to healthcare, reducing the cost of living. Well, absolutely none of that has been done. And now he just has an enemy in Trump. And he's firing on all cylinders. He's going to fast track these different energy projects that are sitting. And some of those energy projects have been sitting in regulatory process for 6 years. So the entire time that the NDP have been in office or in government and been stalling these projects, now EB says they're going to actually fast track these projects. So some of them are literally of their own making, and so that's 20 billion of resource projects that they're going to fast track. Largely because I'm sure that in their economic update, everyone has seen that our resource sector is sputtering. There's virtually no dollars coming in right now, and the NDP government is flailing. So, EB suddenly has an enemy in Trump and can actually move forward with something. He's actually, been talking about doing something. Now, it's very surprising that the first thing he's going to do are, fast-track energy projects rather than actually looking at, all the things that he did mention: housing and affordability and cost of living and healthcare.
Yeah, like in everything, any crisis, there's a silver lining, and I think the silver lining right now is, like the last 10 years of the Liberals and the NDP of really hindering our resource sector and getting it to market. Now all of a sudden everybody's kind of got religion, and now they want to access these markets. But still, I've heard the Quebec premier say not over his land will he be putting hydrocarbons. But it does make us more aware that we have such natural wealth beneath our feet. And how do we access so many markets? I mean, even as a company, that if you have one supplier and one buyer, and that one buyer goes south on you, that's the end of your company. We should have been expanding these markets all along. Like, we've wasted, like when you were in government, most of the big projects in BC are from your government that are just finishing up, right? Like there's not a lot of new stuff since the NDP has been in power. There's not a lot of resource sector projects that have been put into play.
No, there have not been. And in fact, one of the great analyses was done by Ken Peacock, who is the chief economist for the BC Business Council. And, he showed that basically without the four projects, BC's economy, the 4 projects that were started under the BC Liberals, now BC United, maybe nothing tomorrow, but under the former government, that the BC NDP would not have had an economy. And that without those 4 projects, the economy would flail. We're seeing that in real time. His prediction was 100% accurate. We've gone from the largest economy in Canada to the 10th economy in Canada, and we are flailing and flailing hard. And EB is going to be facing a tremendous amount of headwinds. He has 2 choices. One is to increase taxation when he goes to back to government in the next week, or he is going to have to start making some significant cuts. Neither of which is going to be popular with the British Columbian people, and both of which will end up hurting us in the long run.
Yeah, like you talked about some of the changes, like with Chrystia Freeland and Karina Gold, but Chrystia Freeland is actually coming out with a lot of policies in the last few days that sound like, basically she's taken Pierre Poilievre's playbook. And the good one that came out today that she's saying is like no GST on homes, because the GST credit or the GST waiver on rental purpose-built properties did really well for rent, especially in Kelowna here. And then now taking it off of new homes makes sense too, but that was, Poilievre pitched that a while ago, and I interviewed Sean Fraser, the housing minister, and they weren't considering it.
The rental market is the only thing that has been moving forward in terms of housing. You look at Kelowna's numbers that were just presented to council. We had a horrible year in Kelowna for housing starts. It's actually quite detrimental, although we can celebrate the number of units that came online this last year, and we saw that have effect with our rental tenancy, our vacancy rates, which finally crept into the 3%, which is a sign of a healthy city, 3 to 5%. But that is the only thing that has been firing on all cylinders, and that's largely CMHC funding that is available, as well as the GST abatement, which most companies took and just plowed into more rental. There's a window of opportunity, and that window will close. It will not be there forever. So for those that are listening that are like, we're building too much rental, I challenged people to look at the last time that we had a window of this significance, and that was really in the 1970s and early 80s when we had the MURBs. And you see a significant amount of inventory, even in Kelowna and the Okanagan, of that rental, and we have not seen it since. It has been a very, very, very quiet 20 years on the rental front, and so just in the last 3 years, we've seen a tremendous amount of rental being built, and largely because of these 2 programs. If we were to cut GST from all housing, I think we would see a little bit of stimulus there. But right now, I would say that even with interest rates coming down, people are still hesitant because they don't feel confident in the economy. And I'll come right back to my comment at the beginning of this, is that with all of this chaos in the economy, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. And that uncertainty is going to read into the market with people holding back on large purchases, especially on housing. And if you don't have purchases on housing, you're not going to have built housing. And we're going to be in a further deficit in our housing than we were previous to this crisis.
Which leads me back to, we should be recalling Parliament, allowing them to debate,
yes,
and then allowing us to pick whether that leader is Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Jagmeet Singh, or Pierre Poilievre. Like, let the Canadian people speak, pick a leader, and find us a path forward.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree. Do I think that is going to happen? No, not until we actually have a leader and in place. And it will be the first time in history that we've had a prime minister who is unelected, never won an election in his life, and never won't be sitting in the House either, because he doesn't actually hold a seat in Parliament. So it'll be a very interesting time. And right now his MO is really to put out some propaganda, do very few interviews, and his first policy was on reducing carbon emissions and environmental, which I don't know if he just hasn't read the polls yet, but definitely that is not at the top of Canadians' concerns right now. It's not at the top of our financial industries, with all of them leaving the financial emissions fund that he created at GOP26, or COP26, I should say. And so we're looking at all of the banks in Canada have left that committee. All of the ones in the US have left as well. So we're really looking at not a lot of momentum on that front. So I was surprised that that's what he's going to come out with first, except that he did say, carbon tax would be removed from people. I just don't believe
carbon tax,
carbon tax, right? Yep. I just don't believe anything that these guys say. For the last decade they have been, literally, campaigning on carbon tax. And I don't believe that they're about to remove it right now.
I look at their websites every day to see what platforms they're putting up there. Chrystia Freeland definitely has put a lot up there, including increasing the pay of our military by 50%.
Yeah.
Our military has been suffering. We're about 55,000 in complement. Full complement is 76. She said she wants to get it to over 100 or something like that. And homelessness for our veterans. I mean, these are all great ideas, and they should have been done a long time ago.
And they could have been done a long time ago. She was in government. She was the deputy prime minister and the finance minister. Yeah. So in terms of control, she had a tremendous amount in terms of steering the ship to where it was going. So the fact that this has not been done is largely at the feet of those that were in power. And also, Carney has his own carnage that is behind him. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But the polls, definitely a huge bump for the Liberals right now.
I would say though, to give her credit, that she has a platform on her website, and she has about 8 things on there. Most of them, I think, borrowed straight from Poilievre's campaign, which is, because a lot of them make common sense. Maybe the two of them can work together. And then on Mark Carney's platform, there's only one item on there, and it's climate.
Yeah.
And it's still that really big focus. And in there, when we talk about the steel tariffs, he literally wants to put a tariff on steel in itself. He wants to put a tax on steel. So, him and Trump have something in common there. They both want to tax our steel.
Yeah, they both want the Canadian jobs that are in the resource sector to end. So, but I just want to say, I find him to be very disingenuous. On the one hand, he was all about the climate and saying that there should never be another oil and gas project in Canada, and funding oil and gas projects around the world with far less human rights and really hurting Canadians while profiting from oil and gas around the world. So I find him to be very hypocritical in how he has chosen to focus money over the course of the last decade.
I want to shift gears a little bit. You and I have talked about this in the past. Bill C-18, still a thing in Canada where news organizations can't put news on the Facebook platforms, including that includes Facebook and Instagram. We talked a little bit about it yesterday with Ian. Meta hasn't suffered from that. Meta's stock has gone from 200 to 800. It's gone up 400%. Most of the news organizations in Canada, their stock charts are abysmal. If you look at Chorus, they're in really big trouble. And the same thing goes for Glacier Media, Post Media, all those things. And then the government, we asked Justin Trudeau when he was here in Kelowna about the Meta ban, and he said that they will not back down and they will not bow down to the Meta social giant
until they need to.
Yeah, which was last week apparently, because they said they would not advertise on Meta while this boycott was going on. They would support local independent journalism. And here, lo and behold, last week, the statement that came out of the Privy Council's office was, we need to spend money over the GST break. We need to get that word out because we recognize most Canadians are getting their news from social media, and we can't get news on social media right now. So they've allocated monies toward Meta. If that's not a great big punch in the face to media outlets across Canada, quite a few of them done stories on it, but it's definitely now we can't put our news on the platform, which is beneficial to us. Many of us, there's at least 60 outlets that have failed across Canada.
Yeah.
And during wildfires, Kelownians or people in the central Okanagan were trying to get access to information. Some city councils were actually taking the information from websites and then putting it on Facebook, and just for their safety and security. And it was asked at that time, I'm done almost here, he was asked at that time if Justin Trudeau worried about the safety and security of people during the wildfires and news. And he just went into this long, speech about how he wouldn't bow down to Facebook or Meta.
And this all went down when I was still in government, and EB was big on saying, well, we're gonna reach a deal and we're gonna strike a balance with Meta. My big thing is you're dropping the bucket. They don't care about Canada. They don't care about Canada news. It's not going to have an impact on Meta. It's going to have an impact on Canadians. And this was bad policy from the beginning. It was contrived policy. It was largely to benefit a very few amount of media companies who are not winning in the space and who are seeing disruptors like KelownaNow or like others in the space really coming and building that immediate media feedback loop that Canadians crave. And they wanted to shut it down. And so they lobbied government hard, they won. And in doing so, they've hurt themselves, they've hurt all of those that have really relied upon Meta. And I feel for you guys, you're really caught in a catch-22. You don't get the subsidies because you're too much news, but you're not news enough that you can't actually, you're too much news, so you can't actually get onto Meta.
Yeah, and so it's just baffling. Like I said, it's just Ian and I talked about it yesterday. It's just like, it's almost like that old movie, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It's like, it's almost insane, right? You have to prove that you're insane, or you say you're sane, but if you think you're sane, you're obviously insane. You're just like, what? Like, how do you like, nobody's addressing it because obviously there's bigger problems out there right now, but that's why we need a stable government so we can start addressing. Just think of all the time lost on issues we should be tackling, like the drug crisis and all these different things.
Oh, let's talk about the drug crisis.
And we're stuck now. We're basically in Donald Trump's world. Like he's controlling the ball. He's basically like we're the cat, and he's like waving this thing around, and we're chasing it around, and it's definitely not giving us any stability at all.
No, and I thank you guys for keeping it top of mind. I do think that. With a federal election, there is the possibility of seeing that repealed. I think it would be a stroke of a pen and literally, tearing it up. So I'm hoping that will happen and happen very quickly because we need the disruptors in the field, and we need our news. So there is less and less ways to get it, and we need to be able to have access to it. Can I go to the drug crisis though?
Yeah, let's go there.
Because Trump came out with until you seal your border, Trump actually in his executive order cited BC and the amount of fentanyl, and BC was very quick to say no, it's not us. 1% of it is coming from BC and that's or Canada. It's really not us, etc., etc. Largest drug bust in history. Proving that it is definitely us. And then the leaked memo from the Ministry of Health that basically showed that the dosages of safe supply that are being diverted is like in the 22 million. And that was a huge scandal. If you have not seen this, take a look, Google it. You'll see all of the mainstream media has been covering this, as well as those that are not in the mainstream. Very, very damning. I want to thank Fran. I think you say her last name, Yanur, who wrote an amazing journalistic piece in the Northern Beat. But take a read. Absolutely damning about this government, the BC NDP's government, and how the diverted safe supply. The other thing is that they came out and touted their huge success, 13% reduction in the amount of deaths. However, the amount of deaths were only on the illicit drugs. They did not calculate those that died of overdose with prescription safe supply. If you add that back, the question is, how much would that be? And they refuse to answer. It's only that which comes from illicit supply. We know that safe supply is a huge cause of death as well. And the doctors were signaling that as well. So a very, very damning reports coming on this NDP government's drug policy.
Yeah, and then they interviewed, I can't remember which outlet interviewed the head of the ports and that, and he said only 1% to 3% of everything gets inspected.
Yeah.
And 0% gets inspected on rail. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we need to take a closer look at what's going on. And, there's these drug busts that are happening. And there was that big one that was even in Falkland there. That was, that big lab that was being there. So. And
only one arrest so far. That's what I find so interesting, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're only inspecting, if you're only inspecting so little, obviously that, like people are going to take advantage of that, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, it was interesting. One of the police, RCMP, I was asked why they don't infiltrate the port and, and actually try and do an undercover. And he laughed and said, "What would I infiltrate? There is nothing to actually get inside of because they don't inspect anything." And so, for us to be wandering around and try and inspect it, like it would look very, there's no way you could go undercover and start doing that. So I think we have a huge issue. I think it's much larger. I think the RCMP know it's much larger. I think governments know it's much larger. And I think that this was just a hiding behind, it's only 1%. So I don't believe it for a second. I've seen other reports that say it's actually much higher, and that is reason why we see such a huge amount of fentanyl use down the western seaboard is largely because that's the trade route that comes right in from Vancouver and goes south.
Yeah, our military is another thing that it's been brought up now. Like we were talking about earlier, Chrystia Freeland is now saying that she wants to give a raise to kind of induce people to enlist. And I think the Liberals tried that with even trying to get immigrants to enlist, and they had no success with that. Obviously, the wage would help, and then just some pride in our military would help.
Well, and you saw Pierre Poilievre's announcement yesterday up in the north. He too was talking about increasing military spending and really bolstering.
2 icebreakers.
4 icebreakers, 4 new icebreakers.
Was it 4 now? Yeah.
But also bolstering the military on that northern front. And I mean, if people realized how much activity from China and Russia there was on our northern border, I think they would be much more concerned and much more afraid than what we allow ourselves to be today. So I do think that we need to tighten that up. I think that our military spending has been abysmal. We've been fighting over the F-18, F-35s for however long. We've ordered them now. They're years out still. And that we're counting that as our spending rather than actually spending on our military on a yearly basis to meet our NATO requirements.
Yeah, the Russians have nuclear-powered icebreakers up there, and I understand that a Chinese company has purchased an old gold mine in the north that has access to a harbor there that isn't accessible by land. So who's checking on that?
Exactly. It's scary times, guys, and we have to get serious about it. Harper was our last prime minister who really tried to get serious about military and security in the north. And, a lot of people kind of scratched their head and said, why would we need to do that? I think it's very apparent now. And, I think that even Trump was saying, well, that's why they need to become the 51st state, because we could protect them. Well, if we're not protected, they're not protected, because Russia and China can come right through our borders.
That is our largest unprotected border, for sure.
Yeah.
Like north. And like I said, the Russians are up there a lot with submarines and nuclear-powered
as are the
icebreakers.
Chinese. Yeah, and they're there with air, as well. Very high up in the Air Force said if we knew how many planes were flying over there on a daily basis, I think we'd be a lot more concerned.
Well, they fly our coastline all the time and taunt us as well.
Yes.
Like that's the Russian bombers are flying our coastline all the time when they scramble, like NATO jets up there.
Yeah.
And Canada definitely needs to invest in our military and definitely treat our military better. I can still remember that town hall with Justin Trudeau when that military veteran asked, he was in a wheelchair, I think, asked for help, and Justin Trudeau said there's just no money for that. But there seemed to be money for so many other things, right? So if we don't treat our military well, why would anybody join?
Yeah, and I did see that the way that Pierre Poilievre was going to pay for it was to redirect from foreign aid and really, invest in our military and invest in securing our borders. I think that was a brilliant way to say, we don't have enough money to spend on both. We don't have enough money to actually be helping other countries and leaving our own borders unsecured. And I think if anything, Trump has shown us that we really need to have our own force and our own might when it comes to our natural resources, because they are very valuable. For Chrystia Freeland now to come out and say, this is what we're going to do, I mean, I think it's just too little too late. And honestly, she wears the, the stripes of this government. I also think that, the political powers have already decided it's going to be Carney. And I think that's why we're seeing the free ride that he's getting right now.
So just to finish up, just explain, because most people don't know. So Mark Carney could literally become the prime minister on March 9th.
Yeah.
And he's not allowed in Parliament, though.
No.
So wouldn't it be in his
He could
best
stand up in the galleries,
yeah,
I guess.
wouldn't it be in his best interest to call an election right away so that he can actually get down on the... Because he can stay as the PM,
Yeah, I
the
mean,
leader of the party, but he can't actually attend Parliament.
No, he can't. And, you know, it would be very awkward for him to call a by-election. By-elections take a minimum 6 weeks to actually make it through. And with us coming into an election in October, that seems like a very large waste of money. At this point, we see more liberal cabinet ministers deciding not to. Two yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of think if the polls were right, you wouldn't be seeing these, you know, these cabinet ministers choosing not to run again. I mean, it is literally, you know, they are jumping from a sinking ship. And I think that people do feel that or do sense that. It's going to be a very weird time. How do you have a question period without your prime minister standing there? I mean,
you just prorogue government, I guess.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a bizarre.
You could do that, I guess, right?
One.
You could prorogue it till.
Yeah, I mean, I want to believe that we're going to have a spring election. My call will still be that the Canadians want that we need that.
Polls show that.
The polls show that, absolutely. So, you know, my hope is that, you know, once he is put in power, that he will call for an election.
I mean, it'd be tough to argue. Like, if we're in the most, since COVID, one of the most dire economic kind of like situations, we pay, what is it, 338 parliamentarians? Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't we're paying them, why wouldn't we expect them to be doing the work? Even during World War II, the British, they didn't prorogue government. They hashed it out and they argued and they fought and they you know, like and here we are, we're not allowing discourse and/or.
No, it's a horrible choice, and it's basically one that's based on party politics rather than actually what is in the best interest of Canadians. I know I sound like a broken record on that, but it's time for Canadians to stand up and really hold their elected officials to account, and the only way you can do that is on voting day, because right now, let's get loud, let's get, you know, proud, but let's tell our parliamentarians we want them back to work.
Isn't it Flag Day here right away?
Yeah.
So Pierre Poilievre has come out with a video that you can watch on the internet. We'll probably play it in our news show. That if you're a proud Canadian, you can grab that flag and you can put it up on your business, you can put it on your vehicle, you can put it at your home, and, you know, let people know that you're a proud Canadian. But I think we should also, at that same time, people are saying you can't have discourse. We even had a comment there that because it hurts, you know, like our bargaining power. No, we get stronger by talking. And power can't hide behind that thing. They did that in COVID too, where we can't talk about things. We can't do this, we can't do that. Democracy is messy sometimes.
It is.
And it's meant to be messy. And it's meant to hold us accountable. That's how we get better. No different than any sport you play.
One of the tweets that I made while I was an MLA that I got hammered for was when I said, when you try to silence the disparate voices around the table, you lose democracy. And absolutely got lambasted for that tweet. But honestly, I hold that so strongly. The best democracies have these disparate voices that come around and reach consensus and reach at least majority. And that's really where we need to be right now as Canadians. It's what we need as a path forward and as a vision forward. And it's what we don't have.
Here's an analogy for people out there that don't believe in what Renee just said. Try that with your spouse and say that you're not allowed to speak back to me ever because that's hurting our marriage. And see how that works out for you.
Yeah, I think you could. You'll definitely. You could definitely be right, but you probably won't be married anymore.
That's what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, we'll leave it there for today. We do hope for a better tomorrow, and I do believe that this will make us better, and also these challenges will make us consider other markets. And one thing, the message that I have for people is that your vote really matters, and you should be pushing to have it be heard right now.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said.
And we do thank you for watching Kelowna Now.